Hey there, how's it going? This is James Tripp. This is a video for James Tripp on YouTube. Video is going under the title, Question of the Unconscious Mind. You'll see why in a moment. We're just going to be looking at something of what the unconscious mind is, how it works, this kind of thing, which should be relevant to you if you're a human being, because you have a mind and it works in particular ways. But obviously, this question is particularly relevant for the people who watch this channel, who have an interest in hypnosis, change work, this kind of thing. So let me just say first things first. I've got this question that came in on the Creating Courage and Fearlessness program. That doesn't start officially till Sunday, so you can still sign up for that. But people are already in there. There's almost 80 people in there, and people are engaging with the material that's already there. They're already asking questions. This is one of those questions, but it kind of sits outside the frame of the program. I want to make sure I answer it because I'm there to answer questions. Seems like here's a better place to answer it. It is relating to the unconscious mind. So let me just read this question. This program is already pretty life-changing. It says, I found that questions are a superhighway to get to the deeper level content. Okay, questions are a superhighway to get to the deeper level of content. Question for you, James. Are we accessing our unconscious, that's our unconscious mind, whenever we are in the process of retrieving answers to questions? I am so interested in how we actually can know when ourselves and others are accessing the unconscious, and it seems that questions instantly cause us to go there and scan our experience beliefs. Can there be truth to this, do you think? Now, I want to answer this question, but in order to do so, we've got to look at this idea of the unconscious or the unconscious mind, so to speak. First thing I'll say about this is the unconscious mind as a concept is a way of making sense of something that's actually way more complex than that. Now, if you think about this, if you look at the Wikipedia article on unconscious mind, it gives something of a historical overview. It says the term unconscious was coined in the 18th century by German Romantic philosopher Friedrich Schelling. Okay, so it's not that old a concept, just unconscious. It's not even unconscious mind, just the term unconscious. It's relatively, given the span of all human history, it's a relatively new idea. And then unconscious mind, it goes on to say, or it doesn't go on, it actually says earlier on in the article, I have to bring this closer because my eyes ain't what they used to be. It says the emergence of the concept of the unconscious, that is the unconscious mind, in psychology and general culture was mainly due to the work of Austrian neurologist and psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud. So we're talking about ideas that are only a bit over 100 years old, really. Now, the reason I point this historical piece of information out is so that we can just reflect upon the fact that we haven't always thought about things this way. Right? The unconscious mind isn't some given thing. It's a way of making sense of something. I often say our ideas are about reaching out and grabbing a world that is more complex than the ideas we grab with them. And the ideas we grab the world with never are the thing. So I want to make this absolutely clear because the idea of an unconscious mind, which gets paired with a conscious mind, is a simplification that is sometimes useful, but sometimes not so much so. Okay. Now, I rarely reference the unconscious mind when I'm working with clients, but I do sometimes because it's a useful idea for them. When I reference the unconscious mind with clients, what I'm actually wanting them to realize is they don't have to wrap their head around everything that's going on consciously. They can relax a bit, let go of that need to make overt sense of everything, and just allow themselves to connect into an experience and notice what comes up for them. So often when I'm introducing the idea of an unconscious mind, I'm doing it a lot like Milton Erickson would be, the famous psychiatrist and hypnotherapist Milton Erickson. I think if you look at his framework, what he's often doing is he's just trying to get people to let go of tightly controlling, let go of needing to know everything, let go of insistence of what perhaps Albert Ellis would call masturbation, this kind of thing. That when people loosen their grip on how they think things should be, then they free themselves to connect into other possibilities, other ways of doing things. They start to allow the natural unfolding of things rather than trying to control everything. So I think this is how Milton Erickson used the idea. This is largely how I use the idea when I use the idea. So the question is, what is the unconscious mind? What are we referring to with that idea? if we go back to the Wikipedia article, again, it says in psychoanalysis and other psychological theories, the unconscious mind, or the unconscious, is the part of the psyche that is not available to introspection. Although these processes exist beneath the surface of conscious awareness, they are thought to exert an effect on conscious thought and processes and behavior. Okay, I'm not going to read any more than that, but that's an interesting piece from Wikipedia in that it highlights something important, because it says, although these processes, okay. Now, if I'm looking to make sense of the mind for myself and other people, I want to accept the fact that unconscious processes are a thing. I know some people, some colleagues of mine in the world of hypnosis, who are absolutely adamant the unconscious mind doesn't really exist. It's just an idea. There is no unconscious mind. They are right in some ways, but they are throwing the baby out with the bathwater, in my opinion. One of the problems of the model of a conscious and an unconscious mind is that it tends to see them as two different machines, so to speak. There's a machine called the conscious mind and a machine called the unconscious mind. And they don't necessarily interact too much, maybe a little bit, but you are either running the conscious mind machine or the unconscious mind machine. I don't think this is a good way of thinking about things. They're not two different machines. They're not two different containers. They're not two different things at all. I always used to teach many years ago when I was teaching hypnotherapy and that kind of thing. I used to teach that in reality, it's closer to the truth to say there is mind and there is consciousness. And the analogy that I used to give, which I do not believe is original with me at all, is that if you imagine that the mind in total is like a warehouse. This is one metaphor, but sometimes I would use a different metaphor. Actually, I'll use a different metaphor. It's more like a factory that has no lights on, right? But all the machinery is there working, doing its thing. Consciousness is like a flashlight, right? So without the consciousness switched on, the machinery is all there doing its thing. But the switching on of the torch of consciousness means that you can shine that torch of consciousness into different places. Anything that the torch is shined upon is conscious, and anything that the torch is not shined upon is unconscious. It's not the unconscious mind. It's not different. All of it is mind. And then there's consciousness that operates as a faculty within it. Now, that is a simplistic model, because whilst we can take our consciousness and shine it into the workings of our own mind, it's not easy to do always, because consciousness wants to flash where it wants to flash. When we intentionally direct it into the workings of our, that are going on outside of consciousness, it is not true to say that we can illuminate everything that's there. So going back to our metaphor of the factory in the dark, some of the machinery is tucked around corners that we can't get round with the flashlight. So you could say that stuff is perpetually outside of consciousness. Okay. So I want to go back to the question that's being asked here with this new model. There's mind and there's consciousness. So the question is, are we accessing the unconscious whenever we are in the process of retrieving answers to questions? We are accessing, we are of the total processes of our mind at all times. Okay? And most of the processing we are doing most of the time is unconscious. Even if we have, you think of an iceberg and there's the tip of the iceberg, the conscious thought is the tip of an iceberg always. There is no conscious thought without unconscious thought. It's all part of the system of mind, and most of what's going on in the system of mind is going on outside of consciousness. So we are always engaging our faculties that are outside of consciousness, and we cannot not do that. It is impossible to not do it. Okay? So are we accessing the unconscious whenever we are in the process of retrieving answers to questions? Yes, we absolutely are. Right? We absolutely are. The powerful thing about asking questions, okay, now change work practitioners learn to ask questions. Hypnotherapists learn to ask questions. People who know how to self-coach understand there's a phenomenal power in asking themselves questions, because questions direct consciousness. More specifically, they direct attention. Let me just say that. Questions direct attention. Attention and consciousness are not the same thing. You can pay attention to things outside of consciousness. If you don't believe me, recognize next time you find yourself having driven anywhere on autopilot, if you drive a car, right, you go, oh, I missed those last two turnings because I was on autopilot. You were still driving. You were still not hitting other vehicles, not hitting pedestrians. Why? because your attentional systems do not rely upon consciousness. You can pay attention outside of consciousness. So it isn't quite right to say that questions direct consciousness. It's more accurate to say questions direct attention. So they direct where the mind goes, where it flows. And often in response to a question, attention will automatically go in a particular direction, right? So if I say to somebody, how do you feel about that? Well, their attention will go towards their feelings. If I say to somebody, well, so what do you think about that? Their attention will go towards a different quality of their processing, towards what they might call thought, right? It's just a very, very simple example. If I say to somebody, when was the last time you just felt really good for no reason at all? Like those mornings you get up sometimes, maybe they're rare, but you just, I don't know, things just seem okay and you get a spring in your step. If I ask a question like that, in order to process what I'm asking, somebody's attention has to go in that direction, right? So their attention shifts. And of course, the material they access is somewhere stored within their, metaphorically speaking, their data banks, and it must be retrieved in order to make sense of it. So questions stimulate attention and cognitive activity. The only way somebody cannot be stimulated by a question is if they blank it out, if they don't hear it, if they don't process it. As soon as they start to engage with the question, then of course they are processing it. Oh, I just want to say something else about questions, by the way, because I just want to mention that this is in session 6 in the intro material for Creating Courage and Fearlessness, and the session is on asking questions. One of the things that is very common in the world of coaching, hypnosis, NLP, this kind of thing, is that facilitators of change, one of the most powerful tools they have are questions, right? So they ask clients questions to direct attention, to lead cognition, to seed ideas for the purpose of leading them into a different kind of experience, a different kind of mindset, a different kind of learning space often. This is very commonly accepted. As a coach myself, and as a student of learning, okay, because I'm very interested in how people learn, grow, and change, how they build different patterns of engagement with the world, different awarenesses, different structures of consciousness. This is my field of interest. One of the things that gets overlooked is the power of formulating questions yourself, right? The power of formulating questions, getting in and going, what is it that I want to understand here? What's the question that I need to formulate to get to that answer? There's an incredible transformative power in the formulation of questions. Now, the process of formulating questions, of listening with curiosity and with an intent to formulate questions, that I believe also stimulates activity of mind, which, if we're looking at it in the conscious-unconscious frame, will lead to an accessing of the unconscious, which is not really an accessing of the unconscious. It's just an engagement of mind, which is going on outside of consciousness. Okay, so I wanted to say that. So going on with the question here, I am so interested in how we actually know when ourselves and others are accessing the unconscious. And it seems that questions instantly cause us to go there and scan our experience and beliefs. So you can know that somebody's accessing the unconscious if they are alive, right? Because they are of their mind. They are of this. It's not that it's something they are separate from and they access. They are of it. Literally, the person sat in front of you is unfolding from those unconscious processes. What you are engaging with is a person who is of all of that you are attempting to engage, right? So it's there. It's absolutely there. Often people can narrow themselves by becoming overly transfixed with their conscious line of thought, right? It doesn't mean that the unconscious stuff isn't happening, but they become overly transfixed and the system becomes biased towards that conscious line of thought. That's where hypnotherapists like Milton Erickson are getting people to fall out of that and fall back more into the whole totality of their processing and not just that which perhaps sits within that more tip of the iceberg sort of line, so to speak. I'll say this though, Erickson wasn't using the term conscious and unconscious to simply highlight facts about people's minds. He was using it as an entrainment tool to get people out of a certain mode of engagement and into another. So a lot of what he calls your conscious mind, like he might say your conscious mind thinks very linearly. You can think linearly outside of consciousness, right? That's not only a conscious thing. Okay, but if you just pay attention to what your consciousness is able to illuminate, it tends to illuminate things in a line so you don't attend to what might be going on a deeper level. But yes, that's how you can know when you're accessing someone's unconscious mind. Now, maybe you're talking about something different here. Maybe you're talking about when you're sitting with a client. How can you know whether they're too caught up in a certain mode of mind, which is probably likely to be a logical, analytical, rationalistic mode of mind, which is a very narrow track, versus more in the totality of who they are? What I recommend is that you look for, if you're working with clients or working with other people, is you look for shifts in patterns of engagement. This is how I know. So I'm calibrating patterns of engagement. I might do this when I'm working with a client. If they're really caught up in their logical mind, I'll say, it seems like you've got a lot of thoughts about this, right? And they'll go, yes. And I'll say, let me ask you this. These thoughts that you're thinking right now, how familiar are they? And mostly people go, they're pretty familiar, because people don't do fresh new thinking much of the time. A lot of the time when people think they're thinking, they're just rehearsing old thought loops over and over again. Now, to me, real thinking cuts new ground. Now, if I'm working with somebody, or even if I'm just conversing with somebody and I'm looking to help them shift their mind somehow, really what I want them to be doing is cutting new ground with their thinking. That's what's generative. I don't want them rehearsing the same old reality over and over again on a loop. But that's more important to me than whether they're accessing their unconscious mind or not. Are we getting fresh new thinking here? Have we shifted gears into new spaces of possibility? Or am I seeing a rehearsal of the same old thoughts and the same old way of doing things? Okay, so if part of somebody's problem is ruminating around the same thought loops, it's not whether or not they're accessing the unconscious mind or not. It's whether they put down that rumination, or they transcend that rumination, or they fall out of that rumination into new possibilities, new lines of engagement, all sorts of new good stuff. Right? So my basic calibration when I'm working with somebody is, am I seeing change here? Am I seeing a shift in state, a shift in patterns of speech, a shift in, I'm going to be a bit of a hippie here for a moment, but to me, I often experience this as a shift in energy. People will say, what on earth are you talking about, a shift in energy? People deal with energy all the time. They pick up vibes, subtleties, this kind of thing. When you spend a long time in a particular game, you start to do synesthesia-based processing. So I do a lot of felt sense synesthesia-based processing of what I see. But it's absolutely important to say here, if you know, the person asking this question, who I've kept their name blurred out, it's absolutely important to realize here that it is difference that's the key to look for. There isn't a special clue that says now they're in their unconscious, now they're in their conscious. The thing you want to look for is new possibility, right? So a different way of looking at this is that when people are caught up in their way of seeing things, their current habits, their current ruts, their current tracks, they often have certainty, right? When I'm working to facilitate change, certainty is the enemy. If somebody is absolutely, everything that they are certain of will keep them stuck. Right? So most of the time, people's problems are held in place by a bunch of certainties. And I want to find out what those certainties are, right? They don't need to necessarily know, but it can help if they know if they're on board for the change project. But once we get a clear bead on those certainties, then we can start to loosen them off. Now, you could call this belief change. In the world of NLP, people are obsessed with belief change. It's not really belief change. It's the loosening of certainties and the opening to possibility. So as a practitioner of change work, coaching, whatever, the most important mind space that I want to get somebody into is not the unconscious mind, quote unquote. It is the realm of possibility and fresh new thinking, right? The realm of generativity, the realm of creativity. This is about bringing the totality of who they are, which includes their consciousness. Not their conscious mind, but their consciousness. Remember this idea of mind and consciousness. So this is how I tend to work. So I'm calibrating more for shifts in patterns, shifts out of certainty and into possibility. A lot of that is about picking patterns. Sometimes you just get that sense of when somebody connects into a new possibility, they show that kind of curiosity about it, or they go that, oh, I was working with somebody the other day, and here's a good example, actually. I was working with them. I'm not going to give the details of their case at all, but it was a pretty horrific backstory to this person's problem. And they had a lot of guilt about their actions And I think they said something like they did what they did. And I said, did you do what you did? Or did you do what you could? Right? So I asked that question, did you do what you did? Or did you do what you could? Now that might seem like a simple distinction, but he stopped and he paused and he went, oh, you got me there. Now, I don't know what that meant. You got me there, but there was a big shift at that point, right? A significant shift. He had now got out of his old thought loop that was creating a lot of guilt, and he went into a different space. If I was calibrating visually, I would have seen shifts in muscle tone, this kind of thing. But the issue here is not whether they access the unconscious mind. It's did they move into a different mode of thinking, a different mode of being. Okay. So I got somebody banging on the bell. I've got the dog going crazy. So I'm going to close the video now. If you got value from this video, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Please do subscribe. Please do ask questions in the comments section below. If you want to get on creating courage and fearlessness, you absolutely can still do that. This should go out on maybe Thursday, the 4th of April, maybe the Friday, but you can still get on board until Sunday, whatever the Sunday coming is. You figure it out. All right. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to when we next connect.